Welcome to Writer. I'm your host, Kat Filer, also known as KJ Filer. Our guest today is Alex Hugie, author of Loophole. Hi, Alex. Alex grew up in Salem, Oregon. He graduated from BYU with an English degree. He's a content editor working in Salt Lake City. He lives in Utah with his wife and enjoys running, hiking, watching Disney movies, and eating cookies. Alex proudly drank 3 gallons of milk a week in college, admits to stealing a blade of grass from the White House lawn, and he says he went to Hell and Back twice, which he explained is a restaurant. We'll talk about that. Some of Alex's past written works include a picture book called The Hoppin Eyeball, which he wrote in first grade, and a collection of short stories called The Nine Circles of Stupidity. Alex, it's so good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Kat?
I'm doing great. And we've talked forever. This is the first time we've been sort of face to face. So yeah, this is very cool. So Loophole, awesome book. Tell us what it's about.
Yeah, so Loophole is my young adult novel just coming out on the 30th. And it's about a world where almost everything is the same as our world, except there's this system called Visage. And what Visage is whenever a person does a good deed, such as help an old lady across the street, give someone a compliment, their physical appearance visually changes to show that they did a good thing. And if they do a bad thing, punch someone in the face, call someone a name, break a promise, then they get like a gray splotch that indicates immediately that they did something bad. And so it's about this world. And there's a girl named Alana who's just graduated from high school in Oregon. And she's moved down to Colorado Springs to work at a magazine with her brother. And so she's kind of grappling with all these consequences of this Visage system as she tries to kind of find her place in what she wants to do.
I liked your character, Alana, but she's a good person. But as the title would suggest, she likes loopholes. She likes ways of doing things, and it's technically right, but maybe it's not exactly what they had in mind.
Yeah, she's super snarky, super sarcastic, almost to a fault. And you see in the book that she's pretty, I guess, entrenched in the world that she's been raised in. So she has a lot of insecurities about, even more than like a normal person would, about physical appearance. Like, even without Visage, people, we care about how we look. We want to look our best. But in this world, you can literally judge a book by its cover. So that really ups the ante of what she feels she needs to do. But at the same time, like you said, she likes to find ways around the rules. She likes to sort of cheat her way to victory, even though she's not technically breaking the rules. But Visage kind of accounts for that too, though, and you see that.
Yeah, it's very tempting though, and I like the character's whole take on that. So what inspired you to write Loophole?
So I first had the idea, I think I was about 15. So I was a teenager. Coincidentally, I too had insecurities, and I saw a world where everyone was so obsessed with their physical appearance through media, through politics on TV, everywhere. And all my friends, family, people, at home, at church, everywhere. And I just saw such an unhealthy obsession with looking a certain way, especially when often that appearance doesn't necessarily match up with like the trustworthiness or even the general goodness of the person. Like, we can probably all name off the top of our heads some really good looking people who did some really bad things.
Yeah. Did social media play into this at all for you?
Yeah. Because social media is kind of an idealized image of what we want to be. And it made me wonder, what if I lived in a world where there was no discrepancy between who I am on the outside and who I am on the inside? Would that make for a better world? Would it make it more complicated or easier? And so that's kind of where Loophole was born.
Yeah. I when I was reading your book, the first thing I thought was, can we implement Visage on Facebook? That would be awesome.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the differences between Alana's world and our world, the real world?
Yeah. So just right off the bat, there's some like basic things about society that will dramatically change because of this. Like I mentioned earlier, like, politicians always look really nice, but they're often doing scummy things under the table. With Visage, that's not as easy of a thing to get away with. Because if you lie to someone, if you lie to your audience, they'll see right away. And so, like you'll see in the book, it's not super cut and dry as everyone's beautiful is always good, but that's kind of the general perception in society, is that you can trust someone based on their face. And that also affects like business. If you're trying to hire someone and they look super duper ugly, have lots of great splotches, then you're not going to trust that person. Like you don't know exactly what they've done, but you know that they've been up to things that you probably don't want in your company. It affects crime. Criminals will always be really ugly. And like the police, for better or worse, they tend to judge whether someone is guilty based off of how they look on first appearance. So like, I could call someone a bad name and get a splotch in the middle of the day. A cop probably won't arrest me for that. But if it's like the middle of the night and I'm like sneaking behind an alleyway and someone sees me and I'm super duper ugly, there's a pretty good chance that I'm up to something illegal. So,
Or at least that'll be the perception,
mhm.
whether it's true or not. So
Yeah.
yeah. So what are some of the themes that you address in the story?
Yeah. So we've kind of touched a little bit on the idea of appearance versus reality. Right. So the discrepancies between like who we want to be and who we are and what we see and what we think is the truth. So there's a crisis point for Alana in the book where she ironically, there's a point where she kind of wishes that Visage didn't exist, that she lived in a world that's our world, where you really couldn't judge a book by its cover at all, because that would have made it not simpler,
Mhm.
but it would have eliminated all the assumptions, most of the assumptions that people are making in this book. Another theme it touches on, we talk about, or the book talks about the homeless quite a bit. There's several characters who are vagrants, and they have a lot of important relevance to the plot. And we see a lot of kind of the vicious cycle that they get caught into.
Mhm.
Um, and it's not an overtly political book, I don't think, but it does talk about how if you're homeless and you're ugly and you want to get a job, it's really hard to get out of that because like you might be addicted to something, you might like need to steal to eat. So that's a big problem that it addresses. And then like you mentioned earlier, like in social media, always wanting to be liked, always
Mhm.
wanting to be perceived well, and that really
Mhm.
plagues Alana for a long time. So
Yeah. One of the things I really liked about the book was the fact that you're even toying with the idea. What is the definition of bad? What does that mean? What's bad? Is it a black and white thing, or are there shades of gray? Um, is it a bad thing if you hit somebody to save someone else? So you talk a lot about that kind of thing without coming right at us at it. So
right.
so who is your target audience? Who's your ideal reader?
So ostensibly it's a young adult book. But I would say anyone who enjoys the themes that we've been talking about, those are interesting to them. And also one of my big inspirations for the book is a classic book called You Are Special by Max Lucado. And it's a kid's book about this world where these little kind of like puppet people put stars and dots on each other based on like whether they're good or bad. It's kind of like a young adult, more mature reimagining of that, with some differences. But also people who are fans of kind of like actiony young adult, like the Ugly series by Scott Westerfeld, the Unwind series by Neil Shusterman. And I've had people who've read the book say, people who like even some of the more typical themes like Star Wars and comic books, unlikely heroes banding together to fight their foes, Lemony Snicket. And those
Yeah.
are all the kinds of senses of humor and action that I think will be entertained by it.
Yeah, my mind went right to Lemony Snicket. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I also thought about Twilight, although I wasn't a huge fan of Twilight, but the idea was interesting to me. How do you know this person is bad or good just by the label? So yeah, it's
That's
really
a good.
interesting.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
wife Twilight, so and she enjoyed the book, so there's you got that. So
Yeah. And actually kind of liked the earlier one, but then when and this always happens anyway, if somebody visits their world too long, they start to run out of material and it becomes a little hard. It's a little contrived at the end, I thought. But
yeah,
I still understood the appeal. So is this a standalone story, or is there going to be more in this world and with these characters?
yes and yes. So
Okay.
the hope is that you can read Loophole and it's a self-contained story that doesn't leave you wanting to throw the book across the room because the author didn't answer all your questions. But it does leave some loose ends in terms of potential for other stories. Obviously, I'm not going to get into spoilers, but I have plans for at least one or two sequels, maybe more. It just kind of depends on how things go.
Privately, you'll have to tell me who's going to be in these sequels because I already know who they should be. And if you aren't getting the right people, I'll be happy to tell you.
Oh, yeah,
So I'm teasing,
you
but
already
yeah,
know who's dead and alive,
I
and
already do. Yeah.
you probably already have opinions on which characters are the best and which you hate. So
Yeah. I had a hard time hating any of your characters, and that's a tribute to you as an author because even the bad people, there was stuff that, and you think, well, if that happened to me or if that was my reality, I might not be such a nice person either. So
mhm.
there was a little self-examination going on while I was reading your book.
I'm glad.
Am I really a good person? So yeah. What did you enjoy most about writing the book?
Oh, so much. I really enjoyed getting to know my characters, and there's probably some like cliches about authors not being in control of their own characters, but I really felt that there were times when like I would have a draft and the character would make this decision, and then I'd go back and reread what I wrote, and it's like they wouldn't do that. That doesn't make any sense. And so I would learn aspects of the characters that I didn't know, not because they're like sentient or anything, but because um, I think the way my brain is able to complete the picture, rounded out the characters in interesting ways. And I'm the kind of person who wants to write the kind of book that I would want to read. So I wrote things to be entertaining, to be fun, to be witty and cynical in all the good ways, but also to delve into some good themes that are important.
Yeah, little message in there, but it's a something that, and I think actually there's levels. I think that a young adult could read this and someone older could read this, and we could get something out of it, each person, and maybe something a little different. It would possibly
Mhm.
depend on your life experience. So
Yeah,
I thought they were very well written. And I wonder, did your characters ever take a left turn every now and then?
yeah. You mean did they end up making choices that I wasn't expecting?
Yes.
Yeah. And there were a couple of characters that I'm just like, oh yeah, they're just bad to the bone. And then I'm just like, no, no, that's not what a real person would do. Like
Yeah.
maybe they do bad things, but they have a reason for it, like you said.
Yeah.
I also really enjoyed exploring kind of the implications of visage and how that would affect society. This is I've had people comment that this is a fairly kind of focused perspective on the novel. It doesn't get into like big global conflicts or anything.
Yeah.
It focuses a lot on kind of like sort of some political parts of it, some societal issues. But it was really fun to explore how, for instance, like using makeup in this society is illegal because that's a way to fabricate what people would normally consider to be like verifiable evidence that you're good. So
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of interesting ramifications there, and it's really fun to explore that creatively.
Yeah. And then again, that was one of the reasons that my mind immediately went to social media because when you're posting things, and I'm just as guilty as the next person. Well, I don't want to post. Looks a little heavy there. I don't really like that pose. My nose is too long, So you start creating somebody, and it's not really you. So that was very interesting to me. And it's not just about that. There was also all the social implications without getting political. I actually have to say I was very pleased with the story. As a reader, I can tell you that I could recommend this to anybody that I know. So you really walked that line very well. So what was the most challenging thing about writing it?
About writing it, revision is very hard. Like there's obviously the effort of pumping out a first draft, but I feel I have kind of a weird advantage where I suffer from completionism. So if I start something, like my brain will not let me rest until I finish it. Sometimes it might take years. Sometimes there might be other things that come in between. This book was one of those that actually I started the first like 10,000 words, and then other projects came up, and I was also in college and finishing some things. So then like a couple years passed, and then COVID happened, and then summer 2020, suddenly I have time to finish the rest of the whatever 75% of the draft. But it's really hard to figure out when, for example, for this genre, they tend to recommend being under 100,000 words. And my first draft was a few thousand over that. So I had to figure out a couple of chapters to cut out. That was really hard. And then figuring out my character's motive sometimes better without like insulting their intelligence and the reader's intelligence. It was important to have lots of input, I think, from other writers and friends to catch potholes and things that don't make sense. So
yeah. What was your process? Did you have critique groups, or did you have beta readers? How did you work that out?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
There's actually a critique website called Critique Circle that I use quite a bit, because it's kind of a self-fueling system where you critique other people's stuff and you get credits, and then you can post your stories. So I did a lot of that. I had some in-person like friend groups also that went over parts of it. And then I did have some people read over the whole thing and give feedback as well. So
okay. So what is your writing process like?
So I mentioned completionism.
Yes.
And I mentioned that like in this one, it happened to be split between like doing the first 10 to 15,000 words and then taking a break. I tend to focus on one project at a time whenever possible. And I don't think every story I've written follows this exact same process, but I am more of an outliner, I think, than what did they call them? Like pantsers, those who just have no idea what's going on. So I have an outline with like the big plot points of what I want to happen. And then I'll either have a goal of like a page a day or a chapter a week or whatever I feel I'm up to at the time. So,
all right.
And then I have to reward myself with, a Netflix show or a brownie or whatever it is it takes to motivate me Pavlov style to keep writing. So,
yeah, I understand that. Unfortunately for me, my rewards are going to end up cutting into my time as a writer, where I have to now join a group to, like a membership someplace and stop eating and start exercising. So I reward myself with food when I can. So that's bad. I need to do something different. So without spoilers, can you tell us about your future projects? What's in the pipeline?
Yeah. So, like I said, Loophole, it more or less wraps up what's going on in Colorado Springs. However, Visage isn't like a localized system. It's everywhere. It's the whole world. And so in the sequels, you'll see an expansion past that. And I'm not going to get into exact locations or characters, but I will say there's some aspects of society that I didn't really have space to explore very much in this book. One of them being like the arts, like how Visage affects, like whether like can you wear stage makeup? How does this affect the kinds of stories that are produced in this world with Visage? You will see that like a lot of the same kinds of stories that we have in our world are still there, and that's because like the popular trend is just to create stories without visage, to have those interesting, betrayals and other twists that you would have in the stories that we know. Another aspect that I don't talk a lot about, because I knew it was going to be a huge can of worms, is like religious beliefs and philosophy. And so that's something that will be explored a lot in the sequels as well. So
okay. Now, go ahead.
And I also have to admit that I'm working on a different book right now. That's not the sequel to this, but I'm planning on getting back to it after that one. The one I'm working on right now is more of a bigger fantasy type book. I don't know if you want to stick to Loophole right now or what, but
no, go right ahead. If there's something else that you have to share, please share.
Yeah. So this one, I was inspired by action movies where there's so many sequels to them, and the hero like never really gets a chance to breathe or settle down. And then sometimes maybe there will be a movie where it seems like, oh, they got the happy ending. Like one example, Mission Impossible 3. He gets a wife, and he seems like he'll be happy, but then nope. Corporate needs money, so let's make more. Let's have the love interest either die or disappear. And that bothered me, not because it's like literally like creating unhappiness, but there's kind of a narrative and monetary greed that I think the film industry has.
Yeah.
And so this is a book that's kind of a mix between The Truman Show with Jim Carrey. I don't know if you've seen that one.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah. So where there's like basically his whole life is being orchestrated as like a live TV. And so a mix between that and Inkheart. I don't know if you've read Inkheart.
Not that one, no.
But that's a more book focused, where like the characters are able to come out of the book and meet the author. So it's kind of this action hero, and he figures out that he's being controlled by these filmmakers, and so he tries to get out of his story in order to change that cycle so he can choose his own fate.
To go talk to the writers.
Yeah.
Of his. There's a movie about that, but it's not exactly that situation. And I can't remember the name of it, but I do remember it was amazing to me that I hadn't thought of that as an author. I remember watching the movie and thinking, why didn't I think of that? Because you are writing people and they do end up doing things that surprise you when you're writing them.
Yeah.
So,
There's a several sources of inspiration for this one. There's like Stranger Than Fiction. I think that's with Will Ferrell.
Yeah.
There's the Adjustment Bureau, Last Action Hero. So all those kind of are similar. What makes this one different is that like these characters, their world itself it's not fabricated. So like the Truman Show, he lives in a fake city. This character lives in a real world, but the filmmakers have like supernatural abilities to control things that happen in his world. So
okay.
and he'll find out that he's not the only world that's being controlled this way. So
Okay.
he might jump into another world where there's a superhero or a Western or a sci-fi. So
I love that. It's like the motion picture industry. You've got film going and you've got the character jumping from movie to movie. That's great. So, yeah.
So that's what I'm working on right now. But after that, I'll return to Loophole.
Okay. Well, they all sound interesting, and it also sounds like we watch the same movies. So
It's just
interesting. So, is there any question that I have not asked that you wish that I had? The mic is yours.
I think that's a pretty good survey of things.
Okay.
I would just ask, like, are there any questions you have from the book that you want me to answer for you? But maybe that's too spoiler heavy for.
I would love to shut the camera off and ask you questions, but I won't do this in an interview because it would be just full of spoilers. I actually didn't have a whole lot of questions at the end of your book. I came away thinking that you had hit everything pretty well, but I could also see where you're probably going in the next books. And that's probably what my questions would be. What happens over here? And what about over there? So I've seen the same things that you have, I think, probably. And then now you're going to address it in another book. So that'll be fun. So.
Yeah. Well, here's a really random fact. So my wife just finished reading the book a couple of days ago, and she was looking very carefully, and she did find one typo. So
Oh no.
yeah, if I get like a whole bunch of other ones, maybe I'll pay for it to get fixed. But I'm not worried. I've found like typos in Harry Potter books. So,
Yeah.
but a challenge to anyone who reads the book: see if you can find the typo.
No, actually, you did that for me on an early read, and I was shocked because I can't even tell you how many eyes had been on my manuscript, and I swear that when you close the lid to your computer, they multiply. So
Yeah, I mean,
that
and I'm an editor, and I like you can't be objective about your own writing.
no,
And it doesn't even have anything to do with like pride or ego. It's just that your brain fills in gaps
yeah.
to make sense, even if like it's not on the page the way it should be. So
All the writing coaches and stuff that I've talked to or had as writing coaches or friends or anything have all explained to me that you can't edit your own work, but nobody could tell me why. And it was an actual psychologist who told me why. She said it's called closure. If you wrote it, you'll just read right over it. So yeah, we need other people to be involved.
yeah, and nothing will ever be perfect.
No, that's
Like
true.
like the Bible. Well, I won't get into that either. But there's
We could
typos.
be here all afternoon with that one.
There's typos in different versions of the Bible too. I'll put it that
Yeah,
way. So,
yeah, yeah. So yeah, and then there's ways of looking at things, which you touch a little bit on in your book. How are you interpreting the rules? And it was a very I liked it. I really liked it. And like I said, I would be able to recommend this to anybody that I know. I wouldn't have to worry about their political points of view or their religious points of view or their take on society. I think everybody could come away with something out of this and enjoy it. So
oh, I
yeah,
do have a question for you.
sure.
Uh, what is the youngest that you would recommend the book to? Because I wasn't really sure, um, like if I should give it to like my nieces or nephews. Because I'm just like, oh, there's like a little bit of violence, but it doesn't get super gory. So I'm just curious what your thoughts on that are.
I would say 12 and up. And I wouldn't have told you that before my own book was published because I was absolutely shocked to find out that my book was young adult, that the publishing industry considered it young adult. I had a bit of a discussion with our publisher about this and said, kids die. And he said, have you not read The Hunger Games? So, okay, fair enough. But I honestly thought older women were reading that. I didn't know actual young adults and teens were reading it, and they are, and they eat that up. And I think that you handled everything in a way that was very tactful and appropriate. And I would hand this book to a 12-year-old in a minute. In fact, I think I would hand this to a 12-year-old that I wanted to maybe think about their own behavior a little bit, but I just wouldn't put it that way. I would wrap it up as a birthday gift or something and pretend it was just for fun. So maybe
That's
you could
great.
get through.
Because well, Alana makes plenty of mistakes in this book, so
Yeah.
a lot to learn from.
Yeah, but she's still very lovable. I loved her. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I hope so.
Well, Alex, it's been an honor and a pleasure. And listeners, as always, I will post the links in the comments section for you so you can find Alex, you can find his books, and you can stay up to date on his latest adventures. Alex, thank you so much.
Thanks, Kat. It's been awesome.
Thank you.